part of me wants to ask you more about mouse, but then I feel like that's kind of reopening this we just talked about.
Well, it's okay. I mean, when people come to see me, they expect this large rodent in a vest, and I at least clean the vest.
Well, I want to be the cat.
And it's as if, I was some kind of blues musician who managed to have one of my songs played behind a Lexus ad. And at that point, the only thing people know or care about is mouse. Even though, for a while, I was just saying page 222, it would be whatever page of MetaMouse answered that question, because that was the point of MetaMouse. People will be feeling really ripped off if I only talk about some esoteric projects that I've been working on. So
I have questions about those as well. But, well, you kind of alluded to this earlier, where you kind of had to detach yourself somewhat from the process of looking at this stuff. And this is just something I've always been curious about, because I struggled myself with telling autobiographical stories. It seems to me like this staggering feat that you were able to get anything on paper in terms of what you wrote about in Mouse. But not only did you get it down on paper, but you were able to structure it so tightly. I don't know if you can talk about it just seems amazing to me that you were able to do that. I don't know if anyone's ever going to be able to do something like that.
Oh, well, for one thing, it's just going to take so much patience. It was a 13-year project I found out when it was over, right? And, I kept saying through the entire thing, I'll be working on this for 2 years. I just want to make a long comic book that needs a bookmark. And then every 2 years, I just add another 2 years until we got to the total. But it had to do with the fact that I had a good collaborator. Vladek is actually a very good storyteller. It's not amorphous. He's able to actually make something appear by making up dialogue for Nazi guards or whoever as he's going along. That's just his natural way of telling. So it made it that much easier to have that as raw material. Where we run into troubles when I was going on the third round of interviews, just to get more micro detail, then it would be I'd be asking him stuff he never told himself or anybody else, and it was really hard to get that verbalized. But the general thrust of it was the reason that I was eager to make MetaMouse happen, despite the difficulty, which is since it has a DVD, fine 1990s technology about to become obsolete now that the book is out and nobody's going to have slots in their computers anymore. It has an extensive library of all of the audio interviews. So one can hear it unmitigated, where Vladek doesn't have to feel like I've been kind of squashing him into my panels and tell it his way. So one gets to see, in a sense, one can find the parts I shaped and the parts he shaped. And the parts I shaped were things where, I had a plan when I started. I did a lot of work while interviewing my father that had to do with just schemes, outlines. I'll interrupt the story here and do that. Be doing double track this at the same time to the president, the country's being told because I had zillions of notes like that. And then I pretty much was trying to plan the whole book out. And what I would do is every time something would get done, I'd replan everything that was left because it would change. So it was ridiculously, every step it was planned, but it was a different plan, if that makes sense. And the only thing I knew I needed to do was there would be no way to make this book without double tracking, without having to be about, ultimately, not about Vladek's story, but about my trying to understand and express what I was taking in. But that's the actual story, rather than an easy to understand Holocaust for beginners.
But even that process is difficult for you to step back from your own story, your father's story, your own story. And it seems so difficult to juggle all that and then to kind of make it coherent. So I guess it's sort of like you were saying earlier, you're almost treating it like, well, this is just my job.
And just to make sense out of this.
Get to work.
Yeah. It was that, but it was also I remember when the book was getting its millions of rejections, which are now included on MetaMouse. One person was saying, "Oh, it's too much like a sitcom." I don't know what cable network was this. But that thing of cutting back and forth seemed like an especially bad idea to at least one editor who wrote this. And I didn't understand any other way to make the book. It had to do with present and past reaching into each other. But it was like a sitcom in one sense, which is I didn't just sort of amorphously fetch. It was, everything that was chosen was because it cast some light on the situation. So there'd be scores of notes and notebooks and index cards trying things out, but figuring, no, that's just my problem. This is where it actually sits here. So it wasn't autobiographical in the sense of, here's a total confessional. Be sure to turn off your cell phones.
Actually, I should take mine out to see.
But basically it had to do with, same thing happened actually in the introduction to Breakdowns, which has a strong autobiographical component. It wasn't in the confessional mode that I've seen other people's autobiographical comics go to, like your early schizo stuff, which is what's the most terrible thing I know about myself and how can I make it be presentable as a page of comics that help people laugh at my pain. So this was more like, what do I need to communicate through something that happened to me? And it's not, and it had to give the Ronald Reagan quote comes to mind where he says, once you can take spontaneity, you can take anything. I had to find the things that would allow the reader access to me without me being guarded about it, but not just abuse it by just dumping everything I got there. So it was a balance.
Because I have a weird question for you. Do you feel guilty for drawing?
Drawing mouse or just drawing anything?
Both.
Yes and yes. That's why I have to make a distinction before answering. Let's see. I definitely, mouse just, the territory comes with guilt. The second part was something that is, the book was 2 books only because it got separated before birth. And in order to re-enter after a real successful book beyond my wildest dreams with the first volume, re-entering was a year of staring at a stain on a couch before Press was back into a shrink. And I was lucky enough to find a shrink where it actually worked. But the only way I could re-enter was to catch people up on the horrors of what it meant to feel both recognized and successful and have it built so clearly on genocide. So that image of sitting on top of the drawing table, on top of a pile of bodies, was the only way I could find back into a work that otherwise I wanted to flee from. So the guilt there is sort of like rational, everybody understands it. The other more irrational guilt is...
That's what I'm most curious.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure if I experience it as an ongoing large block rather than as guilt per se. But it existed before Mouse and it exists after Mouse, and it has to do with, if you're actually going to insist that people pay attention to something you've made, it has to be in some weird abstract way worthy. Yeah. And I know that I know at this point that I sound like I'm saying it in public, but it actually is just, I have a hanging judge within. I rip up everything I do over and over again and redo it. Sometimes it makes sense at the other end why I do that. Sometimes it's just strictly neurotic. But it was always true that when I was younger, there was a book called Nicolaides, The Natural Way to Draw, that I had to look at in art school. And one of the things was first thought, best thought. And it was never true for me. It was just like first thought, then you get to 20th and it starts coming into focus. And that was the way the work proceeds. And over the years, instead of getting faster at it, I know more about what I don't know. So I get slower at it. I guess all this could be defined as guilt. Is that your experience of it as well, or is it another variant?
That sounds pretty good. I'm curious because you kind of reinvent yourself with every project. Almost every page, you kind of question everything, the process you're going to use, the tools, the materials, even the narrative itself. And I wonder if that's kind of what you're referring to, where you feel like with each thing you're doing, you have to make it worthy, and maybe that's...
It means starting again, so that every time... Now I know what a style is. A style is when you start again and question all your premises to come out with the same answer. And that, for a long time, wasn't the case. Still is only sometimes the case, but it's not efficient. It's the reason it wasn't done in the days of daily comic strips is it would take 3 months to do every day's page. And I look at artists who've gotten it down to a form. You seem to be moving in that direction, making figures that are graphically designed, simplified, and carry the essence of what they have to do in a vocabulary. And I don't have an ongoing, obvious vocabulary. So when I look at Chris Ware's work, I go, that's really a smart way to do things if you're capable of it. And the only way I can do it is start again and figure out what this particular project demands for it to have a visual look. The weird thing was that Mouse was not arbitrary, but the result of a lot of other attempts of things that look rather different than what people know as Mouse, trying to find something that was somewhere between handwriting and a typeface. And it involved like a million iterations to find that. It had to look as intimate as it was just my handwriting, but as clarified as a typeface. And that was like an oxymoron, very difficult to locate the answer to have present that. In other words, even in that introduction to breakdowns, which is made up of a number of short bursts of memory and idea, each subsection was drawn a different way. It's subtle. And there's just like the drawing is very often finding a way to inhabit the idea, that particular idea, rather than pouring the idea into the chalice you built over it. You know?
It's interesting looking through comics, looking at your sketches. It seems like you do get something there in your first sketch, like there's some kind of visceral, essential quality to the finished thing that's already there, but you kind of break it, kind of break it down, you kind of start looking at it from different angles and adding layers and layers to it. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of get to this point, it looks like we're simplified again. So when you're finished on the surface, it looks deceptively simple, but all those layers and all that thought and all that work is still there. But I was struck that even in that first sketch, you do get like to the heart of it.
Yeah, actually I think it's a dilemma for almost every cartoonist, that thing of trying to make something both be the depth charge of the line that's discovering something. Like I actually like looking at drawings in museums a lot because the drawing itself is like a seismograph of the artist's thoughts, so it's very direct and intimate. And I want that, but then I have more thoughts and try and fix it, and I ruin it by fixing it. And, you know, the phrase with comics is, oh, I just did the finish. And finish is more like finished off. It's like, I've killed it, by God, now it can go out in the world. And finding that balance, I've never totally resolved the problem. I look at certain cartoons and I go, oh my, where did they do that? You know, like there's Milk Gross. Sure. I don't know if you guys know this work, obviously Ivan doesn't. But it looks like I have 12 minutes, then I'm going out to play golf. And it's just so alive. And I don't know how to find that most of the time.
That's like fixing it by ruining it, maybe. Mm-hmm. Kind of going the other way.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, I don't know what a wheelbarrow looks like. I was making 3 wheels on a rectangle. It's tough, and it looks great. And I actually had to do something last 3 weeks ago. There's a cartoonist named Richard Thompson who does Cul-de-sac. It's a strip that only lived for about 5 years. And it's, in its own category, it's really great. It's just this category now just seems myopically strange, because why work for a newspaper comic strip when there are all these other things one can be doing? But within that, he actually found a worthy heir to the last comic strip is Peanuts. No, the last comic strip is Calvin and Hobbes. No, the last comic strip is the cul-de-sac. The strip stopped because he developed Parkinson's. He identified having Parkinson's a year after finally getting the strip at the age of 50 or so. And it was a very quick decline, so it's a 5-year run. And I just felt so devastated for him, because one of the reason I'm saying this is his really great skill. He's very smart, he's funny, he's developed lovable characters that are not saccharine. But the real skill he has, his drawing is just like such a pleasure to look at the lines that he makes. I can only think of a few. It's Milt Gross, Gary Cantor, and Richard Thompson, where I look at the drawings and I just go, this just looked like it happened, and it looked like it was fun to do. And I've been doing comics for about 5 decades or more, and like it's not fun to do. So how did they get there? So it's a rare skill. I keep trying to figure out how to do it, and keep either getting in my own way or making it, or there's some other aspect of making this that's more important to me than whether it looks bouncy or not.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I think he's kind of